Journey IFC strives to create safe spaces to worship God. Know that you are welcome just as you are, regardless of religious background or lack thereof, skin color, political affiliation, sexuality, age, culture, or any other label you own or society throws on you. You are welcomed and celebrated here just as you are.
I'm going to read to you something that was given to me when I took a nap. And before I fell asleep, I said, God, we're having a soul team meeting this afternoon. If you have any ideas of what you want us to focus on, tell me. And when I woke up, the word that came to me was guidance. Let's talk about guidance. So I shared with the soul team, and we came up with a lot of different things to talk about once you feel like God is calling you to be anything, anyone, any way in the world. The calling is just the beginning. And guidance is what we need to move from a sense of being called into our next right steps every day, all the time. I tried to write a poem for 2 days. And then I had my morning quiet time on Saturday, Friday, and there was a reading from this book, which is called Each Day a New Beginning. And this is what it said, and Jacob said I could read this to everybody today. The quote at the top is, I do not want to die until I have faithfully made the most of my talent and cultivated the seed that was placed in me until the last small twig has grown. By Kathy Kilwitz. And this is the rest. There is so much to do before we rest. So much to do. We each are gifted with talents, similar in some respect to other people's talents, but unique in how we'll be able to use them. Do we realize our talents? We need only dare to dream, and there they'll be. It's so easy to fall into the trap of self-pity, thinking we have no purpose, fearing we'll take our life nowhere, dreading others' expectations of us. But we can turn our thinking around at any moment. The choice is ours. We can simply decide to discover our talents and nurture them and enrich the lives of others. The benefits will be many, and so will the joys. We have a very important part to play today in the lives that we touch. We can expect adventure, and we'll find it. We aren't alone. We can look for our purpose. It's right here at hand. We can remember we are not alone. We are in partnership every moment. Our talents are God-given, and guidance, that word, guidance for their full use is part of that gift. I will have a dream today, and in my dream is my direction. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Our reading today comes from the book of Matthew. Again, we were in the book of Matthew last week. We're actually in the same part called the Sermon on the Mount. and this is the ending of the Sermon on the Mount. We struggled with it a little bit that last week, and we're going to struggle a little more today. So this is our reading. You're welcome, right? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of God in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? Then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Go away from me, you who behave lawlessly. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise person who built their house on a rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish person who built their house on sand. What a fool. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. Now when Jesus had finished saying these words, the crowds were astonished at his teachings, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. There we go. Yeah, what does that mean, right? Well, hopefully I'll get to say something on that a little bit. I planned on it, maybe. I don't know. So our reading today is a bit of a follow-up to last week. Like I said, this is, the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is preaching up on this mountain, and last week he talked about, if someone strikes you, turn the other cheek, and if someone asks you to walk a mile, go with them the second mile, and we talked about how it said this perfect, but we were like, oh, that's not a great translation. Maybe it's about becoming who we were created to be. It was a bit of a challenging story, but Jesus' stories tend to be challenging, and they tend to make us wrestle, and so we kind of expect to be uncomfortable when Jesus gets up on this mountain and starts talking, because he's challenging us to this new way. Today we're reading the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and it's just as challenging in some particular ways, I think. So at this point, Jesus is talking to his disciples, but the crowd is still there, and they're listening in on what Jesus is saying. And so Jesus says to the disciples and those gathered around that not everyone who calls upon Jesus' name will enter heaven. Instead, only the ones who do the will of God will get this reward. And Jesus knows this is going to upset people because he gives their argument before they even have a chance to say it. And he says that, when they say we've been prophesying and casting out demons and doing these mighty works in your name, Jesus responds saying, I never knew you. Go away from me. Pretty dramatic stuff right here. These people who have been following Jesus and doing what they think Jesus has told them to do may not even know Jesus at all. Jesus then does that annoying thing where he tells a story to explain himself, but only makes things a little more confusing. And he talks about these houses. He talks about this. There's this person who hears the words of Jesus and that he's preached in this mountain and goes out and acts upon them. And that person will be a wise person who builds their house upon a rock. So when the storms come and the floodwaters rise and the winds beat against that house, it won't fall because it has been built upon rock, right? And at this point, we can see that Jesus is the son of a carpenter and was raised as a carpenter. He's using what he knows, and it's coming into play a bit. So Jesus knows that a strong foundation is key to the success of a structure, right? We get that. Jesus continues by saying that those who hear his teachings and choose not to act upon them will be like a foolish person who builds their house on sand. And as we may guess, this is not a great idea because when the storms come, the house has this great fall, right? And we don't need to be carpenters to know this. We probably all have read The Three Little Pigs, or at least know of The Three Little Pigs. The pig who built their house out of straw, it's not as great. It goes down when the wolf blows, but the pig who has the bricks, they survive. It's simple physics, I think. I don't know physics.
It's hard since pigs don't have opposable thumbs.
Yeah, it's hard for the pigs. Yeah, it's a hard work. But as someone who grew up in West Texas, in Tornado Alley as they call it, I was familiar with the dangers of storms and the need for safe structures. In Plainview, you either had a basement or you knew someone nearby that had a basement that you could run to. And so when the storms would hit the town and they would send out the tornado warnings, we'd all run into one of the basements, right? And even my grandmother's house, she had it prepared that when she built her house and got the basement, all of her steps were these bright, different colored carpets. All of them were different, so that when people came and they were stressed, they wouldn't trip on their way down the stairs. But the thing about West Texans is that people are a little too comfortable with tornadoes. And by people, I mean my brother and my dad. While I was hunkered down in the basement, just like sobbing because I was so terrified of tornadoes, my brother and dad would be outside on the porch seeing if they could see the rotation in the sky. They'd want to chase it and get in their cars, you know. And if you knew my brother, you would know that he can be fearless at times. Often, he's fearless, it seems, all the time. Maybe it's not always, but it feels that way. But as a kid who was much younger than him, I was always so scared. I'm just an anxious person. If you haven't gotten that from me yet, that's a little tidbit. I'm a little anxious at times. And so these times of these really scary storms, Adam, my brother, would be so calm. And so one time when a storm hit and I started panicking, I remember Adam taking me and he calmed me down. He's 13 years older than me, and so at that point I trusted him. He was like my superhero at the time. And even though my head was saying, we need to get to a basement, this is not safe, I was like, whatever, I'll trust my big brother. And I remember him taking me to the big windows. We had these 3 big windows that kind of took up one wall of our living room, and he had the blinds all the way up so we could see the full storm. And I remember him laying down on the couch that was in front of it, and he got me, and I kind of laid, not on his chest, but kind of on top of him, in a sense. And he just talked me through the storm. He pointed out the lightning and all the colors it made, and he made me listen to the sounds of the thunder and the rain. And he told me that there was nothing to be scared of, and that we were safe inside, there on that couch together. And I believed him, because he was my older brother, and he was right. We made it through that storm. We survived. And I don't even know if he remembers this moment. I told him I was going to tell a story about him today, but I don't know if he remembers this moment, but it stuck in my memory. And as I read this story about Jesus and those houses built on stone and rock, I thought back to these times when I was grateful for this house with a sturdy foundation. I was grateful for houses around us that had basements like my grandmother's house. But I also think back and I'm grateful for a brother who had a sturdy foundation in that storm when I was caught in my own sandy foundation. And this is where our word of the day comes in, grounding, right? Grounding is our word. What my brother had in this moment was a solid grounding that helped him stay calm and know that he was safe in the storm. And it seems that his grounding was contagious for me. Jesus talks about people who hear his teachings and do or do not do what he has advised them. Jesus says we need a firm foundation or else we'll be swept away with the storms, with the floodwaters. When the winds hit, our foundation will wipe out, our house will be gone. But as we sit and ponder this together, I wonder where we would fall on this spectrum of rocky to sandy foundation. Jesus tells us that many people go around spouting their actions as God's gift to the world. They may be teaching and healing and doing all these wonderful things that look really impressive, and they may build up these large followings, and they might even build these fancy cathedrals. But Jesus warns us that these people may not even know who Jesus is. They may invoke Jesus' name while being blind to who Jesus really is. And the thing is, we here at Journey can fall in this trap too. We so often, and I mean we as a humankind, can get so caught up in our own agendas and how we want things to be done, and we can work, trying to show off how great we are, only to learn that our grounding was a bit off, that all along we had forgotten what and who has called us to the work we are doing in the world. I think the thing about this reading that is so hard is it seems too definitive, like those on the sand are just wiped out, they're swept away, while those on the rocks survive. But being aware of storms, I know that even the strongest foundations can crack with enough wind and rain. I even think of 9/11. We saw that some things can even shake us, even if we have a sturdy, rock-filled foundation. Jesus' teaching here gives this false sense of security, it seems, that if you have this whole Jesus thing figured out, that if you hear what Jesus says and know what to do correctly, you are safe, right? That's what it seems. But as I mentioned before, I know that sometimes my foundation is a little sandy. Sometimes I'm not grounded well and I can be swept away. Sometimes we need to run to our neighbor's basement and hope that their grounding can help us out. Sometimes we need neighbors or an older brother, or friends, or pastors, or counselors. But we're not always going to be rock solid. And of course, I'm not just talking about our buildings and our houses, I'm talking about us and our faith. It doesn't always feel like we are built on rock, and a lot of times we aren't. A lot of times we are built on sand. And sometimes the storms are big enough that even our strong groundings will give way too. So how do we prepare then? How do we build our houses and lives and faiths upon stone? Well, I think it starts with grounding. Where do we begin? What is at the core of who we are that we can build upon? To find the firm and rocky places in our lives, we have to get to know ourselves, right? At some point, we have to stop what we are doing, stop building up all these houses that are bound to fall. We need to turn and find the solid places to start back over with. Sometimes we need to see other people who are grounded to remind us we are safe. And sometimes we need them to help keep us safe and help us start back over when we're built on sand. I'll be honest, I don't think Jesus' words are definitive that if you're built on sand, you're swept away. I don't think the conversation ends with us being swept away and Jesus just yelling, "Well, I never knew you!" Instead, I imagine that Jesus would be the generous and most gracious carpenter that he is, and I feel like he would help us rebuild on sturdier ground. So my call this week is that we go out and find ways to ground ourselves. We can try talking to a friend or a mentor or a counselor, or we can do some meditating or stretching or listening to music or going on a walk in nature. Whatever we choose, though, know that it will require us to stop whatever work we are doing and just exist for a bit. It will require us to reground ourselves. But know that we're not alone in this. We're actually surrounded by gracious carpenters who can help us start over, who can point us to solid ground. And also know that we have welcoming neighbors and grounded siblings like my brother when I was a kid, right here in this very space, who can help us when the storms start to wash us away. So I leave us with some questions to think about this week. What kind of soil are you building your life upon? What is it time to let wash away? What can you do to become grounded? And what will keep you grounded when the storms hit? Amen.
Being grounded, what does that really mean? Grounding is where you find it. There's no set way of being grounded. A tomato plant that grows in a topsy-turvy, its ground is above it. A bromeliad attaches itself to something else. It actually gets its nourishment from the environment around it, not where it's rooted. Look around you right now. Look at your foundation, because this is where it is. And may I remind you that concrete, one of the most firmest foundations we have. starts out partly as sand. So grounding is where you make it. And Jacob, let me rewrite that last verse for you so it might be a little more palatable. So build your house on a good foundation. Build your house on a good foundation. Build your house on a good foundation. And your house shall stay firm, and the blessings will come down. As the prayers go up, the blessings come down. As your prayers go up, the blessings come down. As the prayers go up, the blessings always come down. Go in peace. Amen.